Hello, all my friends down in San Antonio. I am sorry that I'm not with you. I'm sorry I can't go to Taco Cabana with you for lunch. I love San Antonio. I was stationed there twice, um, and I know how much we all wanted to be together. We're going to have a presentation real quick right now about CRADAs, material transfer agreements, and NDAs. I've just put on the disclaimer uh, so all of you can see it. All these opinions are my opinions and not the opinions of DOD or anyone here at BAMC or the Army. They're my own opinions, but I think I'm right, so you might as well listen. Now we're going to start this off in a fun way. We're going to have a YouTube that was put out by the Federal Lab Consortium that will tell you all in general terms about federal tech transfer.
GPS navigation is everywhere these days. Our cars, our phones, and even our watches. But did you know that GPS was originally developed by our nation's top defense laboratories for use in military operations? Thanks to a process called technology transfer, GPS has been made accessible for businesses for the last 20 years. Every day, our federal laboratories conduct exciting research, create new materials and devices, invent technologies that lead to life-saving medicines, and produce the latest and greatest in science and technology. Savvy entrepreneurs and business people, like you, have benefited from federal resources by commercializing these technologies, which helped grow their business and our economy. The federal laboratories are eager to make their ideas and inventions, even their facilities, available to all American businesses, from startups to large corporations. Imagine being able to license and sell the latest technologies from NASA, the Department of Energy, or the National Institutes of Health, or gain access to state-of-the-art federal labs for your own projects. For example, you can access Brookhaven National Laboratory to conduct testing on everything from hydrogen storage materials to metallurgical reactions. You could even partner with government scientists already conducting advanced work in your field as a launching point for your totally new concepts. Some of the most groundbreaking technologies have come out of lab partnerships and lead to more spin-offs than a technology may have originally been developed for. Memory foam, originally developed by NASA to absorb shock impact during space shuttle launches, has been commercialized into products ranging from mattresses to sports equipment and even prosthetics. A program instituted by the Department of Defense to help military commanders manage information overload has now become part of the Apple iOS we all know as Siri.
Okay, I set up your meeting for today at 4 p.m.
Start by reaching out to a federal laboratory or agency representative to see what resources they may have available. And this is where we, the Federal Laboratory Consortium for Technology Transfer, the FLC, come in. Visit our website at www.federallabs.org to find out how technology transfer can help your business succeed and ensure our continued competitiveness in the global economy.
Okay, so now that you saw that video, and it was pretty fun, it gave a pretty good overview. There's some particular reasons why we in Department of Defense Medicine are very interested in getting involved in tech transfer, in CRADAs, in MTAs, and NDAs. And in these days of COVID-19, I'm very busy helping our labs, our MTFs, including ISR, get involved. Why? Because we have limited resources. Although Congress is going to give us millions of dollars to do research, we do not have enough money to carry out all the research, to commercialize, to get these products through the FDA so that they will be available for purchase for our warfighters. And of course, the Army and DOD don't manufacture these products. These are commercial products. And because of that, we need to work with commercial companies. We are completely dependent upon non-federal entities to accomplish our mission. But in the meantime, we do some really cool science, and so do people in industry. And we want to collaborate with them because our resources are limited. Last, really it is last, participating in tech transfer is the law. So that's another reason we do it. So let's start with, what is a CRADA? A cooperative research and development agreement. The big picture is that it's a contract. It's a type of research and development contract between federal labs and non-federal entities. It's not a federal acquisition regulation contract. It's not a grant, but it is a kind of contract. This is the definition of a CRADA, and you should all have paper copies of this from Sharon. So I want you to take a minute and read through it so that you can see for yourselves the legal definition. And if you understand the legal definition of a CRADA, you're about 90% there to understanding what this business is all about. Essentially, it's an agreement between one or more federal labs and one or more non-federal parties through which the government, via its labs, provides personnel or services or facilities, equipment, intellectual property, or other resources with or without reimbursement. But the laboratory itself can't give funds to the non-federal parties. On the other hand, the non-federal parties can give any of those resources and funding. In any given year, we bring in, on average, about $20 million in cold, hard cash that our collaborating partners give to us to allow us to do the work, because we often just we don't have money on hand. And of course, we don't plan for CRADAs in the same way that we generally plan for contracts or think about grants. It's this exchange of resources towards the conduct of specified, that is, we set out the details in some degree of granularity of research and development, and it's got to be consistent with the purposes or mission of the lab. But just to be clear, and Congress made this clear, a CRADA is not a collaborative agreement like we think about in the assistance world, and it's certainly not a FAR-based contract. Okay, now what we're going to do quickly is we're going to run through that definition, and we're going to talk about the parts of it. So once we break it down, you understand what all that legal gobbledygook was all about. So a CRADA is an agreement between one or more federal labs. So what's a federal lab? The definition is up on the screen, and it's even further defined in the Department of Defense Instruction 5535.8. So it's essentially a place where the federal government, in some substantial part, is involved in research and development. In the Army, for our purposes, the director of the Tech Transfer Office up at ASALT, the Tech Transfer Program Office, gets to designate what entities within the Army can participate in this program and are therefore defined as laboratories. And unlike FAR-based contracts or grants, the lab director or commander gets to sign these contracts. So as the next slide indicates, it talks about, well, what can the laboratory provide? Well, essentially, any resource that the laboratory commander has control or domain over. They can provide the use of personnel, the personnel can go over to the collaborator's place. They can travel there. They can provide the services of the laboratory. If we have an excess facility, and we have some examples of that, we can allow our collaborating partner in a CRADA to have access to it. We can give our partners use of our equipment. We can give them actual property or other resources. And again, we can do all this with or without getting reimbursed from our collaborating party. So as it says on the bottom of that slide, this is pretty cool. This is standalone discretionary authority of the lab to negotiate and receive reimbursement from nothing to the fair market value of whatever those goods and services are. As the next slide shows, the federal laboratory itself cannot give any funding over to the collaborating party. But I'm going to explain this because some people get confused about what this means. While the laboratory itself, let's say that the Institute of Surgical Research itself cannot give its funds to the collaborating partner, the headquarters of the Medical Research and Development Command, they can give a grant or a contract to that partner, or that partner can get the money from some other federal agency. It doesn't matter to us really where that partner gets its funding, whether it's internal to itself or external. It's only important for our purposes to know that the laboratory can't give any money to the collaborating party. And oftentimes the collaborating partner can use funding from a federal grant or other transaction, or even a contract, can use that funding and pass it along to our laboratories. It's usually better though, in those cases, if, for example, the money is coming from Fort Detrick, that Fort Detrick send the money directly down to our lab rather than it go through the collaborating partner, then down to the laboratory through the CRADA. And the reason for that is whenever we give money on one of those awards, and that money is a pass-through from the awardee to someone else, well, the awardee takes a cut, part of their overhead. And so it's not as efficient for us to pass the money through the collaborating partner first, and then if it comes from again, going over what the collaborating partner can provide, they can provide anything. They can provide funds, services, equipment, intellectual property, whatever resources they have, personnel. And we have, so you know, we have done thousands of these agreements. So we have had every variation imaginable between what the labs have given and what the non-federal collaborating partner has given. And under the CRADA authority, our laboratories can accept, retain, and use those funds, personnel, services, and property. It's not an unlawful augmentation like sometimes happens if we get goods or services or funding from sources where there's no legal authority. This provides us all the authority we need to keep those goods and services. And so you know, the exchange of resources between the parties and what each party is going to do in the collaboration is all negotiable. That's part of the interesting difference in a CRADA between some of those others where the contracting officer is stuck under rules of the FAR, etc. Here, it's really dependent upon what the laboratory needs, and it's important that the laboratory researcher who's going to be most responsible for this, the PI, that they understand and work with the Resource Management Office and the Tech Transfer Office so that they can work out a statement of work with the collaborator that's fair for both parties, and it takes best advantage of the resources that each party brings to the table. Okay, well, a YouTube is worth 1,000 words. So now I'm going to show you a YouTube that talks about a particular CRADA opportunity. And it's pretty cool. I think you're going to enjoy it.
About 3 years ago, Mayor Walsh committed the City of Boston to Vision Zero, which is a worldwide movement to end traffic fatalities and serious injuries. For the City of Boston, our goal is to do that by the year 2030. The sideguard issue actually arose as sort of a precursor to our interest in Vision Zero, in looking at some of the crashes that were happening, especially for people who were riding bikes and walking in the city. A lot of them were in conflicts with trucks, and looking into research and working with the Volpe Center, we learned about sideguards.
Volpe is a federal R&D lab within the Department of Transportation, whose mission is to advance transportation innovation for the public good. Truck guard is a device. It's like a physical barrier on the side of a truck or other vehicle that rides high off the ground that, in a collision with a pedestrian or cyclist, is intended to help sweep that person out of the way instead of allowing that person to fall under the wheels and be crushed. So it is really a way to mitigate certain types of crashes involving the sides of trucks and pedestrians or cyclists.
Bicycles and trucks do not go well together. The roads they're not meant for both. So this will keep a little bit of an area where they can't fall in between the wheels.
We came up with an internal proposal for pursuing this path of research on sideguards. That led to a pretty interesting set of findings that we presented externally at a professional society meeting, where the City of Boston happened to be in attendance. City of Boston in 2012 had a very bad year with respect to fatalities. The city was very interested in what they could do to address that challenge. That precipitated the discussion between Volpe and the City of Boston. It led to a partnership in 2013 where we helped provide some best practice research to them. They launched a pilot on 18 vehicles at the City of Boston with sideguards as a means to protect bicyclists and pedestrians in collisions.
We liked it. We wanted to demo it. Next thing you know, I'm putting it on my trucks. The accessibility is amazing. The whole design, it's simple, but it's very, very well thought out, and that's why we're using them.
As a federal lab, we don't have a truck fleet. We don't have the means to deploy this. On the other hand, a city with its own truck fleet, with many contractors, many avenues to implement an onboard technology like a sideguard, is in position to deploy, but not necessarily in position to develop the practices and the specifications and know how to do that. I think it was a very complementary set of skills that came together in the partnership.
We have put it on our water trucks. We have put it on flatbeds, a few box trucks, but pretty much that's it. The trash trucks are the most popular because they are out on all the city streets and the contractors are all over. The ordinance states that anyone doing business with the city must have them.
The cost of an installation on a truck runs between $800 and $1,000 per truck, but you compare that to the safety benefit that it offers. We've seen, unfortunately, a number of instances where had side guards been on trucks, there would have been a better outcome of a situation. So I would hope that, as time goes on, that this becomes a standard on trucks as opposed to, something that's added after the fact.
Volpe was an important partner and continues to be an important partner to us in thinking through what side guards should look like, what are the most effective tools, how do they fit on different sizes of trucks. We could start with our own fleet here, but also applying it to all the contractors who do business with the city. There are a lot of other types of vehicles, and they have been invaluable in being able to provide that research support that is needed to enact best practices.
The CRADA between the Department of Transportation and the City of Boston. And I want you to reflect about what was going on. The laboratory, which is part of the Department of Transportation, and that their building is located in Cambridge, Massachusetts, their mission is to make transportation safer for the millions of us who are on the road. They recognized that there was a problem with between bicycles and large trucks that sharing the road. Of course, trucks are wider. Bicycles sometimes aren't paying all the attention they need, or the truck driver isn't. And we end up injuring or having injured lots of bicyclists who get pulled under those trucks. And so they came up with what seemed like a simple but brilliant idea to put these guards on the sides of the vehicles. They designed it, but what they didn't have, is indicated in the video, is they didn't have a way to test it to see if it really worked. So as often happens, and as the video indicates, representatives of the two organizations were at some kind of conference. They met up, they started talking. City of Boston, of course, with all those students, has a problem with accidents and bicycles. They were willing to participate. They ran the side guards on the garbage trucks and some other trucks for a while. And it seemed to work well. And then the next question is, well, what happens then? Well, the Department of Transportation probably owns this is what happens next. The Department of Transportation probably owns the intellectual property on those side guards. What they're going to do is advertise to cities around the country, cities, counties, states, those other organizations that are concerned about the same kind of accidents. They're going to license out that technology. It will probably be sub-licensed to local metal workshops where they can make those side guards for the various sized vehicles that are there locally. So again, that's how that technology will end up making its way into our cities and the other places where there's a concern about fatalities or accidents involving transportation, involving trucks and bicycles. Okay. Material transfer agreements, that is MTAs and non-disclosure agreements, well, those are both done under the same legal authority as CRADAs. If you go back and look at that definition of a CRADA, you'll find that exchanges of materials between our laboratories and the non-federal party, or an agreement that we're going to just exchange information in anticipation of perhaps entering into a CRADA, those both fit into the definition of a CRADA. So that's what those are all about. One thing that is super cool about CRADAs is, unlike the world that you're probably accustomed to, we don't need to compete this broadly. Now, this is important. Most of the time, the researchers in the labs are very specialized, and they know who out there has the cool technology. That might be because they've just gone to a conference or symposium. They've walked around, they've talked to other researchers, they've been looking at the literature, so they know who they want to work with. We can choose in CRADAs, we can choose who we want to dance with. We don't have to spend 3 months or 6 months putting out a request for proposals. We can just pick up the phone and call the people at the company that we're interested in working with, or shoot them an email and say, hey, are you interested in doing some research with us? It looks like we have some things in common. We're doing X, you're doing Y. Why don't we talk about doing a collaboration together? That's how most CRADAs come about. Okay, so in the CRADA itself, most of the first part of it is standard boilerplate. It talks about who the parties are, the purposes of collaborating together. It has some standard words about intellectual property, and confidentiality. It talks about when the agreement starts and when it would end. In the statement of work, which talks about the actual research and development, there's a lot of things that are negotiable. For example, who owns the data that comes out of the R&D is negotiable. The format is negotiable. Although we have a template that we normally use, we oftentimes are working with other federal labs, or the other party themselves may have some kind of standard research and development agreement that they're used to, and we can tailor that. That's my job. We can tailor that agreement so that it meets our legal standards and needs and the parameters of what the parties are intending. So data rights are negotiable, format is negotiable. What's really important for us is the substance of the agreement. Now, that's not true with all federal agencies, but it's true with us. We're very flexible. We've done thousands of these. I'm very accustomed to working with a lot of different agencies, formats, and with hundreds of different companies. And so we're used to it. Invention rights are also negotiable. One thing though, in any case, whether, of course, whether we are the inventors on the government side, there's a co-invention between the collaborating party and the lab, or even if the collaborating party themselves are the inventors, the government always keeps government purpose rights. That's in the statute, and there's only rare exceptions to that. But the one thing that's important here when we're talking about invention rights is remember that that the government doesn't manufacture all these products that we're going to use in Army medicine, the ventilators, the everything you can think of that we use. We don't manufacture those. We need to work with commercial partners. So it's not about us trying to make a lot of money, although we can license our inventions and bring in royalties. In the end, we need those partners so that there's medical products to help the soldier and warfighter. The statement of work can include milestones. It can have go, no-go decisions in it. If the other party is going to give us money, it's always better if they pay us up front, or if the work we're doing is going to take a long time, that they pay us in tranches, in small parts, so that we have our money, because the labs usually don't have any extra money sitting around if this is going to expend resources. And we've had a couple of occasions where our CRADA partners have gone bankrupt. We had to go back in one case and modify the CRADA, so we agreed to take less money. And in another case, we were lucky, the bankrupt company was bought by another company that wanted us to continue the work. But as I said, it's always better if we can get our money up front. But because science is not exact and weird things always happen, we can renegotiate how the parties are going to move forward with the work. We can extend the time. Occasionally we need to go off in different directions. And that's okay. That's fairly easy to do. Okay, we're on our next video. I want you to watch it, and as you're watching it, think about the things that I've been saying about the resources involved, what the agency wants, what the non-federal party wants, and think about, in the end, why it was important that these parties work together.
Flying in was a great shock. What I saw out the window of the airplane were matchsticks scattered across the hills and valleys.
The hardest part, don't have water, is cleaning and preparing the meals. That's the harder part.
There was a time that we are desperate because there's no water.
We drove up the hill and the gentleman began to shout in Spanish, pure water. The people poured out of the town and gathered some 50, 70, 100 people behind our truck. It was the only safe water they'd had.
Like a small mini water treatment plant.
It's really great. I'm impressed with the system. It's simple and very useful.
The CRADA began to help us at WaterStep define and hone better what we wanted to accomplish.
The CRADA is a cooperative research and development agreement, and that allows the federal government, EPA, to work directly with private companies. And so there's intellectual property on both sides. We can take each other's ideas and we can develop something new. I felt like we could work with them, add technology, add capabilities, and then we would have something that could be taken to the field.
This is what we need. We need water in the communities.
What EPA has done is let us say that this is the right tool in your toolkit and your family can be safe and worry about other things to get you through this crisis.
Okay, let's think about this video that we just saw. It was pretty dramatic. All of us remember the hurricane and the terrible devastation in Puerto Rico. Well, prior to that, there had been a CRADA between this small company that makes a water purification system to be used in emergency occasions and the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. They had worked together. The primary technology belonged to the small company, but they needed help. Whenever we get water from whatever source on a large scale in our country, it is regulated by the EPA. So to sell that technology that the company had come up with, they were going to need to get the stamp of approval, the regulatory approval of the EPA. So they worked with them to refine the technology in various ways to pack it up. And so it was ready and available commercially at the time of the big hurricane. So the company had intellectual property. I suspect that the EPA had some, and they licensed it to the small company for utilizing with their water purification system. And that company can then manufacture those and they can have them available, or they're probably selling them online. They're probably going to national meetings of cities, counties, and states that are on emergency preparedness. So those things, next time there's a big emergency, a lot of places will have those systems already in place, and they probably will have people trained up on how to utilize it so that there's emergency sources of water. So those are, with the Boston example and this one, those are two wonderful examples of how CRADAs came to play and were dramatically useful to getting new technologies of use to the public that satisfied the mission of the laboratories and a public use. Well, I'm going to be on this and I'll be available to answer your questions. Hopefully we'll organize this in a way that I've been available to answer all your questions anyway. Hope you enjoyed this. This was an introduction to tech transfer and an introduction to some of the most important vehicles that we use, the CRADAs, the material transfer agreements, and the non-disclosure agreements. Again, sorry I wasn't there in purpose. Sorry I wasn't there in person. And till next time, this is Bob, out.